The hall was full of people as Olia stood quietly in the corner. It was her sister Cairo's grand celebration. The announcement of a $13 million inheritance from their late grandfather. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and Cairo basked in glory, wearing a dress Olia had secretly sewn for her. Their parents stood on stage smiling proudly. Her father raised his glass and said, "To Cairo, the pride of our family. Not everyone is born smart, but some are born to shine." The guests laughed, and Olia's cheeks burned. The dumb one, they called her. The invisible daughter. But as the night ended, an old man slipped an envelope into Olia's hand and whispered, "Your grandfather left something for you too, but only you will understand what it means." When she opened it later that night, her entire world changed, and soon so would theirs. Since Olia was a little girl, people called her slow. Her parents said she would never be like her sister Cairo, who was smart, confident, and perfect in every way. Cairo always got good grades, awards, and gifts, while Olia got silence or scolding. When guests came to their home, everyone praised Cairo, calling her the pride of the family. Then they would look at Olia and laugh. Someone would always make a joke saying, "Olia can't even count without her fingers." And everyone would laugh louder. Olia smiled weakly, pretending it didn't hurt, but deep inside, her heart broke a little more each time. She tried hard to please them. She cleaned the house, cooked meals, ironed clothes, and even helped Cairo with her projects secretly. But no one noticed her effort. They only noticed her mistakes. Her father often said, "Cairo was born to lead, and Olia was born to follow." Her mother would sigh and say, "At least she's good for housework." Olia never argued. She kept her head down and worked quietly, believing maybe one day they would see her worth. At school, Cairo would ignore her, pretending they weren't even related. If someone asked, Cairo would laugh and say, "Oh, that's my sister. She's a little slow." Those words stayed with Olia for years. She stopped trying to prove herself. She started hiding her drawings and little crafts, afraid they would laugh again. But in her heart, she still dreamed that maybe one day, someone would see her differently. Even when she helped her parents organize family events, no one thanked her. At her sister's birthdays, Olia would stand in the background, serving food while Cairo took photos with friends. And when people clapped for Cairo's success, Olia clapped too, hiding her pain behind a gentle smile. Her life became a quiet routine. Work, serve, listen, and endure. Everyone saw her as invisible, as if she didn't matter. But what no one knew was that beneath her silence, a storm was building. Every insult, every laugh, every word of mockery was shaping her, teaching her patience, strength, and humility. They thought she was weak, but she was only waiting for her moment. The moment when life would finally show them who the real fool was. When their rich grandfather passed away, the whole family gathered in a big hall for the reading of his will. Everyone was dressed in black, but behind the sad faces, excitement filled the air. They all knew the old man had left behind a huge fortune. Houses, land, and millions of dollars. Cairo sat proudly in the front row, smiling like she already knew what was coming. Olia sat quietly at the back, holding her small purse, feeling invisible as usual. Her parents whispered to each other, "Of course, everything will go to Cairo. She deserves it." When the lawyer opened the will, everyone leaned forward. "To my beloved granddaughter Cairo," he read, "I leave $13 million, my estate, and my shares in the company." The room filled with cheers and applause. Cairo's friends hugged her, and her parents beamed with pride. Her father stood up and said loudly, "I always knew she was the true heir of this family." They toasted to her name as cameras clicked and guests congratulated her. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "And to my other granddaughter, Olia." The room fell silent for a second. Everyone turned to look at her. The lawyer handed her a small, brown envelope. "This," he said softly, "is for you." That was it. No amount, no property, no fancy title. Just a plain envelope. The silence broke into laughter. Her mother shook her head. "Probably just a sympathy letter," she said with a smirk. Cairo giggled, whispering to her friends, "Maybe it's instructions on how to count money, since she never could." Olia sat frozen for a moment, her heart heavy but her face calm. She didn't open the envelope right away. Instead, she looked at the lawyer, who gave her a kind nod. Then, quietly, she placed it inside her purse. Her parents ignored her and continued celebrating Cairo's big win. To them, Olia had once again proved she was the useless one, the forgotten child with nothing. But as the laughter echoed around her, Olia's mind went back to the last time she saw her grandfather. He had held her hand and said gently, "The greatest gifts are not always wrapped in gold." Those words replayed in her head like a whisper from the past. She didn't know what was inside the envelope, but deep down, she felt it wasn't just a letter. It was something meant only for her, something that could change everything. That night, after everyone had gone home from the inheritance gathering, Olia sat alone in her small room. The laughter from earlier still echoed in her mind, but she pushed it away and placed the brown envelope on her table. For a moment, she just stared at it, afraid and curious at the same time. Slowly she opened it. Inside were three things: a faded photograph, an old folded map, and a small silver key. Her hands trembled slightly as she noticed a short note written in her grandfather's handwriting. It said, "For the one who sees before judging, follow this path." Olia didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew her grandfather never did anything without reason. She looked closely at the photograph. It was an old picture of him standing in front of a workshop she recognized from her childhood. The place had been closed for years after his retirement. Everyone thought it was useless now, just an old building filled with dust. But something about the map made her heart beat faster. It had small red markings and one spot circled in ink: the workshop. The next morning, while her family was still sleeping, Olia took the bus to that part of town. The workshop stood quietly at the end of a narrow street, its windows cracked, its door rusty. When she stepped inside, the smell of wood and oil filled the air. Everything looked untouched, like time had stopped there. Dust covered the tables, old tools hung on the walls, and faded blueprints were scattered across the floor. She walked slowly, running her fingers over the workbench where her grandfather used to build things. It felt like he was still there, guiding her silently. Then she remembered the small key. She looked around, searching for a lock. After a few minutes, she noticed a loose floorboard near the corner. When she lifted it, she saw a small metal box hidden underneath, covered in dust. Her heart pounded as she used the key to open it. Inside, neatly packed, were several envelopes, old documents, and letters, all written in her grandfather's handwriting. She began to read, and with every page, her eyes widened. The papers revealed that her grandfather had a secret business empire, hidden investments, gold accounts, and lands no one knew about. The documents clearly stated that Olia was the only legal heir to this hidden wealth. Her name was written on every signature line. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she realized her grandfather had believed in her when no one else did. While her family mocked her for being the dumb one, he had quietly chosen her to continue his true legacy. That night, Olia walked out of the workshop holding the box close to her chest. The world still saw her as invisible, but she finally understood. Her story was just beginning. Olia sat on the floor of the old workshop, surrounded by the papers her grandfather had left behind. Her hands shook as she went through the files one by one. Each document revealed something new: hidden shares in companies, gold deposits under her name, and land titles scattered across different cities. Her grandfather had built an entire secret empire that no one in the family knew about, and now all of it belonged to her. But there was one note that caught her eye, written in his familiar handwriting: "This wealth is not for the loud, but for the wise. Use it well, and it will grow. Misuse it, and it will vanish." Olia understood what he meant. It wasn't just money, it was a test. Her grandfather wanted to see if she could handle power with patience and intelligence. He hadn't chosen her because she was perfect. He chose her because she had heart. She realized she couldn't tell anyone, not even her parents. They would never understand. They would either laugh or try to take it away. So she decided to keep everything a secret. For the next few days, Olia studied the documents carefully. She read his old letters, his business journals, and even his unfinished ideas. He had once designed handmade furniture, bags, and decorations inspired by African art. Those designs touched her deeply. She thought, maybe I can bring his work back to life. With only a small amount of savings and the guidance in those files, Olia started working. She began in her tiny room, using leftover materials to make handmade crafts based on her grandfather's drawings. She worked late into the night, learning from his notes, experimenting, and improving. At first, no one noticed. Her family still mocked her, calling her the dreamer, with no future. But Olia didn't care anymore. She had found her purpose. Soon, her creation started catching attention. A small local shop agreed to display her work, and within weeks, customers started asking for more. People loved the designs. They were simple, meaningful, and full of culture. With every sale, Olia reinvested the money, slowly rebuilding one of her grandfather's forgotten brands. She named her small business Dora Heritage, after her grandfather's last name. Every product carried his story, his love for art, and her hard work. She didn't need anyone's approval now. She had something real to build. Months passed, and what started as a quiet experiment turned into a fast-growing brand. Orders began coming from outside the country. People were talking about a young woman who was reviving an old African legacy. Olia smiled quietly to herself, knowing that the world still saw her as the dumb one. But soon, they were going to learn the truth, that she was never slow. She was only preparing. While Olia was quietly working to build her dream, Cairo was living like a queen. The moment she received her inheritance, she started spending as if the money would never end. She bought expensive cars, designer clothes, and jewelry she didn't even wear twice. Every weekend, her house was full of noise, lights, and laughter from parties that lasted all night. People surrounded her everywhere she went, praising her, calling her the golden daughter. But none of them truly cared about her. They only stayed because of her money. Cairo believed she was unstoppable. She opened 2 fashion stores, but she had no idea how to run them. She hired friends who knew nothing about business, and within months, both stores started losing money. When her accountant tried to warn her, she laughed and said, "Relax, I have more than enough." But slowly, the numbers began to drop. Bills piled up. Suppliers stopped delivering. The money that once came so easily started disappearing faster than she expected. Still, she refused to slow down. To keep her image alive, she took loans and borrowed more, believing things would fix themselves. Her fiancé, who had always loved her fancy lifestyle, began to lose interest. He complained that she was becoming too stressed and no longer fun. When her credit cards got blocked and she couldn't pay for his expensive trips anymore, he quietly walked away, leaving her heartbroken and embarrassed. The gossip started spreading. People who once cheered for her began to whisper behind her back. The same friends who had filled her parties stopped answering her calls. Her parents, though worried, refused to admit that Cairo had made mistakes. They kept defending her, saying, "She just needs time. She's still our shining star." When neighbors mentioned Olia's growing business, they brushed it off. "Olia? She's just playing with crafts," her mother would say, rolling her eyes. Cairo, desperate to fix her image, tried starting another business, but everything she touched failed. She had no patience, no vision, and no real skill. Each failure pushed her deeper into debt. She sold her cars, her jewelry, and even her designer bags to pay off loans, but it wasn't enough. The girl who once stood on stage as the pride of the family was now avoiding phone calls from banks and hiding from people she owed money to. And while Cairo's perfect world was falling apart, Olia's quiet success was beginning to rise. But no one in the family noticed. They were too busy covering Cairo's mistakes. Still blind to the truth that the dumb one they ignored was slowly becoming the one with real power. Months passed, and Olia's little brand kept growing faster than she ever imagined. Her handmade crafts, once sold in a small corner shop, had now gained attention online. People loved the beauty and culture behind every design. Her products told stories, stories of strength, family, and heritage. Orders started coming. From bigger cities, then from other countries. She could hardly keep up, but she never stopped working. She spent long nights in her small workspace, designing, packaging, and shipping everything herself. Each item she made carried her grandfather's hidden symbol, a quiet tribute to the man who had believed in her when no one else did. One day, she received an email from a well-known investor who had seen her designs at a craft exhibition. He was impressed by her creativity and wanted to meet. Nervous but determined, Olia went to the meeting wearing one of her handmade dresses. The investor smiled and said, "Your brand has something special. It feels alive." He offered to partner with her and help her expand globally. Olia agreed, but she made one thing clear. She wanted to keep full creative control. She knew exactly what she wanted her brand to stand for: pride, patience, and purpose. Together, they launched her products internationally. Within a year, her brand name, Dora Heritage, became known across borders. Luxury stores began displaying her creations. Influencers and celebrities started talking about her designs, calling them a bridge between tradition and modern art. Journalists called her the mysterious young woman reviving an old African legacy. Since she never revealed much about her personal life, people were drawn to her calmness, her quiet strength, and her humble story. Then came the moment that changed everything. A well-known TV network aired a special feature on her success story. The host showed her company logo on the screen, a golden emblem of intertwined initials that matched the secret insignia her grandfather used for his original company years ago. At that moment in their living room, Olia's parents and Cairo were watching the show. The logo flashed across the screen, and silence filled the room. Her father's face went pale. Her mother covered her mouth. Cairo froze, her eyes wide. That's Grandpa's symbol," she whispered. They watched in disbelief as the host said, "This young woman has not only revived a forgotten African brand, she has transformed it into one of the most admired design houses today." The family couldn't believe what they were seeing. The dumb one, the girl they laughed at, had built an empire bigger than anything they had imagined. Olia had not just inherited her grandfather's legacy, she had brought it back to life and made it shine brighter than ever. While they once saw her as a shadow, the whole world now saw her as a star. The day after Olia's TV interview went viral, her office doors burst open. Her parents and Cairo stormed in, their faces red with anger and disbelief. They didn't even wait for her secretary to announce them. Her mother slammed her hand on Olia's desk and shouted, "How dare you use your grandfather's company name? You stole his legacy." Cairo stood beside her, glaring. "You knew about all this and kept it from us. You tricked him into giving it to you." Olia looked up slowly from her paperwork, calm and unshaken. She had expected this day to come. "I didn't steal anything," she said softly. "I inherited it, legally." Her father's voice trembled as he pointed at her. "Stop lying. Your sister was his favorite. He left her the inheritance, not you." Without a word, Olia opened her drawer and placed a brown folder on the desk. Inside were the original will, legal papers, and letters in her grandfather's handwriting. She gently slid them toward her parents. "These are the documents your father left for me," she said. "He gave me access to his private investments, the ones no one else knew about. He trusted me to continue his true legacy, the one built on honesty and hard work, not greed." Her mother's face turned pale as she picked up the papers. The signature was real. The seal was official. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's. Still, she shook her head, whispering, "No, this can't be true." Cairo, her voice trembling with anger, shouted, "You manipulated him. You pretended to be innocent so he'd feel sorry for you." Olia looked straight into her sister's eyes and said quietly, "No, Cairo. I just didn't disappoint him." Her words hit harder than any shout could. The room fell silent. Her father stepped back, realizing the truth. The documents were undeniable. His once useless daughter was now the rightful heir to everything her grandfather had built. He lowered his eyes, unable to speak. Her mother began pacing, muttering to herself, while Cairo's eyes filled with tears, a mix of anger and shame. Olia stood up and faced them. "You all laughed at me for years. You said I was slow, stupid, and unworthy. But Grandpa saw what you couldn't. He saw that patience and kindness are stronger than pride." Her voice remained steady as she added, "I never wanted revenge. I just wanted respect. And now, I don't need your approval anymore." Her mother and father said nothing. Cairo looked away. For the first time in her life, Olia was no longer the quiet one in the corner. She was the woman standing tall in her own light, the one they had all underestimated. Cairo's life began to crumble faster than she could control. The loans she had taken to keep up her rich lifestyle were now due, and the banks were no longer patient. They started calling, then sending warning letters. When she couldn't pay, they moved in to take her properties. Her expensive cars were repossessed, her luxury house was auctioned, and her name appeared in newspapers under the headline, "Former Heiress Faces Financial Collapse." The same friends who once surrounded her disappeared one by one. No one picked up her calls anymore. The people who had once praised her for being the pride of the family now avoided her as if she were a stranger. While Cairo's life fell apart, Olia's world grew brighter. Her brand had become one of the most admired in the country. Big companies wanted to collaborate with her, and her name began appearing in magazines and TV interviews. She received invitations to business conferences, charity events, and fashion shows across Africa. People respected her story, a quiet, humble woman who had turned pain into purpose. Despite all the attention, Olia remained calm and grounded. She still preferred to work in her studio, still wore her simple clothes, and never forgot where she came from. One afternoon, instead of celebrating her new partnership deal, Olia visited her grandfather's grave. She placed fresh flowers on it and knelt down quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saw me when no one else did. I hope I've made you proud." A soft breeze brushed against her face, and for a moment, she felt as if he was right there beside her. Meanwhile, her parents were struggling too. Without Cairo's money, they realized how deeply they had depended on her inheritance. Their savings were almost gone, and their social circle had started shrinking. People who once praised them now whispered about their mistakes. But instead of admitting where they went wrong, they tried to rewrite the story. They called Olia, pretending as if they had always supported her. "We always knew you had potential," her mother said sweetly on the phone. "You were just a late bloomer." Her father added, "We're so proud of you, daughter. We always believed you'd make something of yourself." Olia listened quietly, smiling faintly. She knew their words were not from love, but from regret. They didn't believe in her when she needed them most. They believed only now, when the world did. But she didn't argue or hold bitterness. She simply replied, "Thank you," and changed the subject. In her heart, she had already moved on. She no longer needed their approval or their praise. She had something far more valuable: peace, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing that while pride had destroyed them, humility had saved her. Early one morning, Olia's phone rang. The number flashing on the screen was one she hadn't seen in a long time, Cairo's. For a moment, Olia hesitated. She almost didn't answer, but something in her heart told her to pick up. On the other end, Cairo's voice was shaky and filled with fear. "Olia, please," she began, her tone breaking. "They're taking my last apartment. I have nowhere else to go. Please help me." For a few seconds, Olia couldn't speak. Her mind replayed every cruel word Cairo had ever said. Every insult, every mocking laugh, every time she was called the dumb one. She remembered the days she ate in silence while Cairo and her parents enjoyed meals bought with her grandfather's money. She remembered the loneliness, the rejection, the years of being treated like nothing. And now, that same sister was begging her for help. Olia took a deep breath. "Cairo," she said softly, "I'll help you. But not because of what you did or didn't do for me." There was a long pause. "Then why?" Cairo whispered, confused. "Because," Olia said gently, "I refuse to become like you." The words were calm but carried a weight that struck Cairo deeply. Olia didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. So, instead of letting Cairo lose everything, Olia quietly went to the bank and bought her sister's debt. It cost a large sum of money, but Olia didn't even blink. She wasn't doing it to prove power. She was doing it to show that kindness could still rise from pain. Later that week, Cairo was invited to Olia's company office. The moment she entered, her pride shrank. The building was elegant, buzzing with workers who respected Olia deeply. Everyone greeted her as Madame Olia. Cairo lowered her head, feeling small for the first time in her life. Olia met her in her office, sitting behind the same desk her grandfather once owned. "I've cleared your debt," Olia said calmly. Cairo's eyes widened in disbelief. You did?" "Yes," Olia replied. "But there are conditions." Cairo nodded quickly. "Anything." "You'll work here," Olia said. "You'll start in the customer service department. No special treatment, no excuses. You'll earn your way back, with honesty, not arrogance." Cairo wanted to protest, but she couldn't. She was out of options. "All right," she whispered. "I'll do it." As she left the office, she looked around and saw Olia's name glowing proudly on every wall, a reminder of how far her sister had come. For the first time, Cairo realized that the sister she had mocked as weak had become the woman she now had to depend on. The tables had truly turned. The grand hall was filled with lights, cameras, and some of the most powerful business leaders from around the world. The air buzzed with admiration as Olia's name was announced. She walked gracefully to the stage, wearing a simple yet elegant dress, her calm presence commanding more respect than any crown ever could. The screen behind her displayed the words, "Excellence in Legacy Leadership." The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering for the young woman who had revived a forgotten empire and turned it into a symbol of hope. As she accepted the golden award, Olia took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces before her. Among them, she saw her parents in Cairo sitting in the front row, the same people who once laughed at her dreams. For a brief moment, memories of their harsh words flashed in her mind, but she let them fade. She had forgiven them, but she would never forget. She stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent. With a calm voice she began, "They called me the dumb one." Her words echoed softly, yet powerfully. Every camera turned toward her. But wisdom isn't loud, it's patient. It listens. It builds. Her voice grew steadier. It forgives, but it never forgets. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. And that was all the intelligence I ever needed. For a few seconds, the hall remained silent, moved by her truth. Then applause erupted, louder than before, filling the room with thunderous admiration. Tears glistened in many eyes, even among the toughest executives. Reporters rushed to capture her speech, and within hours, her words would circle the globe, inspiring millions. In the audience, Olia's parents sat frozen. Her mother covered her mouth, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her father bowed his head, unable to look up. The daughter they once dismissed as slow, unworthy, and foolish had become everything they had ever dreamed of, and more. They realized, too late, that her silence had been strength, and her kindness had been power. Beside them, Cairo looked at her sister with a soft, heavy gaze. There was no jealousy left in her eyes, only deep respect. For the first time, she understood that Olia's victory wasn't just about money or fame. It was about grace, about rising above pain without letting it harden the heart. As Olia walked off the stage, the crowd still clapping, she smiled faintly to herself. Her grandfather's words echoed in her heart, just as they had from the very beginning. The greatest gifts are not always wrapped in gold. And now she knew, she had become that gift.